Look, the expectations on the adaptation of Wicked were sky high. This is one of the most beloved musicals of all time. Part 1 came out last year. It was a hit. This week, the final part comes out. Wicked for Good is out now. Does it do Elphaba justice? I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. Kathleen Newman-Bremang is here. Sarah-Tai Black is here. Cyrus Ware is here. Hello, everybody. How's it going?
Hi.
Hi. It's a delight to have all of you. What a delightful slate of faces that I'm looking at, and I'm ready to get into it. So let's start with this.
It's more important than ever that you lift everyone's spirits.
Here's the plan. I have no plan.
Well, I do.
Oh, thank God.
Haven't you heard? I'm the Wicked Witch of the West.
Okay, I am all kinds of excited for this movie. I've been waiting a year for part 2 of Wicked, and now we arrive at it. And Kathleen, you are actually in New York. There's many things that I'm jealous of in terms of your trip from New York. Like I saw that you posted from an HBO event where you saw Morgan Spector from the Gilded Age. And I was like, I can't handle the jealousy. But the thing that really made me jealous is that you were also at the premiere for Wicked for Good. Tell me a little bit about where does this sequel pick up in terms of the first movie and then this one?
Oh, I mean, okay, there's so much we're going to get into, so I'm going to try to keep this brief, but the sequel picks up with a time jump. Elphaba, of course, played by Cynthia Erivo. She's now reviled as the Wicked Witch of the West. She's living in hiding. She's trying to expose the wizard's lies. She's trying to free Oz's animals. Ariana Grande's Glinda has everything she's ever wanted. She's risen to fame. She's this beloved symbol of goodness. She still doesn't have any magic of her own, but with the help of Madame Morrible, she's keeping up this illusion. She's literally living in a bubble to maintain the wizard's rule. She's about to marry Fiyero, played by Sexiest Man Alive, Jonathan Bailey, who hasn't stopped his search for Elphaba. That's where we are.
Incredible job just summarizing exactly where we are. And then we get there. Kathleen, how do you feel about Wicked for Good?
This is where, how much time do we have? No, okay. You know, I'm a crier, right? You know that I love Wicked deep in my soul. So I was a mess throughout this movie. I did love it. I do understand the people who say it's not as strong as the first one. You know, famously, Act two of the musical is a bit weaker than Act 1. But at the end of the day, Wicked is about Elphaba and Glinda's friendship. And it's about two girls who grew together while figuring themselves out, while figuring out what it means to be good and loyal and take care of your community, what it means to love, to do good, how to benefit everyone and not just yourself. And so if Wicked Part 1 is Elphaba's coming of age, Wicked for Good is Glinda's redemption. So I think if you, like me, are Elphaba's #1 stan, and you are still mad at Glinda for accusing Elphaba of flying off the handle when she was just doing the right thing, if you're still mad at Glinda for groveling in submission to feed her own ambition, you might have a hard time watching her rise as this arbiter of all things good, you know? But that's why Wicked works, I think. Its political commentary might be clumsy at times and watered down so much from its source material, but it is about how well-meaning moderates act in service of their own selfishness over the greater good. It's about fighting back against fascism, and Glinda learns all of this and changes her ways, and Ariana Grande plays that growth so beautifully. Cynthia Erivo is unreal in this. I think that John M. Chu, all he had to do with this cast is not mess it up, and he didn't.
Okay.
I think that if you love Wicked, you're going to love it.
Okay, you said a lot of things I want to pick up on there. This idea of sort of like the political through line of Wicked, which actually came through more than I thought that it would in the first part of the movie. I thought there was like pretty good attention paid to it. There's something to be said about the payoff that you come to expect from that. The other thing is, you know, we mentioned that this movie is called Wicked for Good. For Good is the best song in Wicked that is not called Defying Gravity. Like For Good is like this really beautiful song. It's the landing point of Act 2 of the musical. But Act 2 is pretty weak in general. Like people like sort of love Act 1 of Wicked, and then they go, boy, sure can't wait to get to the resolution where we get to For Good, because like, that's like the other sort of big payoff song. You get to this place, Sarah-Tai, where the reviews for Part 2, For Good, are kind of mixed. However, critics do seem to agree on the thing that Kathleen just mentioned, the idea that Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande have this beautiful chemistry that you get to see on the screen. Tell me about how you felt about their performances together just as a pairing.
I will say, going to the advanced VIP screening, I was surrounded by super fans like Kathleen, and it was such an anthropological experience seeing them like react to things. Like people were crying, people were laughing at, people were laughing with. And so I was sitting there trying to like understand, like as someone who is not a Wicked fan, who hasn't read the book or the musical and just knows the basic premise. I'm an average Wicked layman, you know?
Yeah.
And I was trying to figure out like how they're enjoying this. And I could tell that they could really enjoy. No, I mean literally. I don't mean that in a mean
Like,
way. I mean
as in,
literally.
what is the enjoyment?
What is the enjoyment?
I'm getting
How
red
is
to filth
and
right
how
now.
is it how is it working for them? Like that's what I'm interested in as a critic. And
Yeah.
I could tell that Cynthia and Ariana's performances were landing for them,
Yeah.
unlike other tonal things in the film that they were all laughing at. And I was like, wow, it's like, I feel like they're having like a Don't Meet Your Idols moment. But I do feel that Cynthia Erivo is definitely the strongest of the cast in both parts, but especially in the second part. And you can also really see in this like parasocial but also realistic way that because these two films were filmed at the same time, you can see that tender, sweet, cloying, and then uncomfortable codependent thing between Cynthia and Ariana that we've seen from them on the press tour. You see it develop on screen and you're kind of like, the impact of your relationship is not being translated into like a complexity of story, but it's still there. And it's like this weird kind of push-pull between real feelings and acting feelings and what we're thinking they're thinking and all of that. It was a very anthropological experience. I'll say that.
And that's such a generous word. I want to come back to this exchange that you're talking about, this idea of relationship between Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande in real life, because I do think that's worth talking about. But Syrus, I'll go to you because I think one of the big challenges of adapting a musical like Wicked is that people who love the musical, they have high expectations. Like, this is the thing that I go to this musical for. I'd like to see that on the screen. And those things can be sometimes lost when you adapt something like that to a movie. Do you feel like Wicked and Wicked for Good, do you feel like they were able to adapt the things that work about the musical into the movie?
I think the thing that people loved about the musical are these big power moments where they get to sort of belt out these, like, sing their heart out. And we get a couple of those moments in both of the films. So you'll be able to just sort of jump in and, if you care to find me, look to the western sky, while you're in the shower. So we do definitely get those moments. But, I read the book. I didn't see the musical originally. So I was thinking of this translation from the book. To me, whenever you have something that takes a complex story and divides it into two parts, you're turning into some dangerous territory.
Yes.
It's thin ice because it can be hard to keep that momentum going across both films. I'm old school. I was interested in the Yellow Brick Road. I wanted to see what happened with the tornado. I wanted to see what happened with some of the early basics of how that part of the story is adapted in this larger, this is behind the scenes of what's actually happening. And I'm not sure that I was blown away in the way that I expected after having read the books.
First of all, I think you're the first person to say, I'm not on board with the musical. That's not the thing that got me into this thing. I went straight from book to this movie because it must have been a shock for you to go, wait a minute, what are all these songs? And what are the things they're representing from the adaptation of the Gregory Maguire book? But also, I think if you're dealing with the adaptation of a musical, maybe it invites a certain set of audiences more fervently, Kathleen. Like people who are like, I saw this thing on Broadway, I saw this thing, in my town, and I'm showing up to capture that energy. So in terms of this musical and the musical adaptation of this into a movie, how do you feel it compares to other adaptations of musicals to the screen?
I mean, I think I'm the only one here, but I think that it holds up with the greats. I do think it had a lot, as Syrus is mentioning, it had a lot to do, right? Like it is this prequel to one of the most famous stories of all time, The Wizard of Oz. It also had to adapt this musical that is beloved, that people know by heart, and try to hit all those moments. I do think like the thing you're waiting for, like No Good Deed, As Long As You're Mine, those moments like really, really hit for me, like As Long As Your Mind is very horny in this. That's my whole
That's
thing.
your whole
it's
thing.
great.
Yeah.
I do think that like those moments really paid off and are just as good as any of the big moments in any movie musical you're going to see. So I think it holds up with you know, The Sound of Music, The Wizard of Oz, Dreamgirls, Grease, I do think. And then I think because we're talking about Cynthia Erivo, Ariana Grande, they've embodied these roles so fully. I think they will forever be synonymous with them in a way that will continue throughout their careers. And I think that this adaptation is something that if you love it, you're going to pass it on to your families and it will stand the test of time, I think.
Sarah-Tai, I do think like one of the stories of this thing has been the relationship between Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande off screen. Like you mentioned the sort of very deep intimacy that they've had as they sort of did the press run for the first movie. A couple weeks ago, there was somebody who sort of tried to like take a picture with Ariana Grande on a red carpet somewhere, and Cynthia Erivo like sprung into action before the security guards could even react, and she was like the first person to say, "Get off of her. That's I'm here to protect Ariana Grande." And people kind of reacted to that as like an extension, right, of this sort of this, let's say, veneer of intimacy that we've seen them sort of form on screen. What do you think it is about that relationship that has captivated people so much? Because there's been so much attention to the ways that they kind of interact with one another.
I feel like you're not going to like my answer.
That's okay.
Again, as a Wicked layman who is like seeing their dynamic very much removed from any kind of personal history with the musical. I think that it is a lot of fodder for speculation because of just how vulnerable and emotional they are being in a way that for some people can be concerning. There's been a lot of talk about like musical theater kids with competitive eating disorders. There's been a lot of like glib kind of sapphic jokes. It's just, I don't think we've seen two stars of a huge vehicle like this act in this specific way in public in a while, if ever. And it just kind of adds to the lore of the film and the musical and the book in let's say interesting way.
Having said that, I am invested and interested in this lore, and I will be, in fact, seated to see Wicked this weekend. So I'm going to do it. And then we'll have this conversation again next week. But we got to move on because I'd like to talk about a story that has been kind of going on online surrounding former First Lady Michelle Obama. Here's what you need to know. First of all, Michelle Obama has been doing this press tour for her new book. And during this interview with actor Tracee Ellis Ross, Michelle was talking about how she wore braids after Barack was out of office and the ways that it was covered after she wore braids. She said she wanted to wear braids as First Lady, but then felt that look would not be accepted. And then here's the moment from that interview that went viral.
Let me explain something to white people. Our hair comes out of our head naturally in a curly pattern. So when we're straightening it to follow your beauty standards, we are trapped by the straightness. That's why so many of us can't swim and we run away from the water. People won't go to the gym because we're trying to keep our hair straight for y'all.
So, Kathleen, a lot of people online took issue with Michelle Obama's comments, and not just white people either. You saw some black women sort of took issue at all. What was it you think about Michelle Obama's comments that rubbed people the wrong way?
I mean, first of all, I don't think people can handle when black women talk about our hair, honestly, specifically non-black people, because they don't get it. And most of the time, the conversation is just not for them. But I think because Michelle here, Obama jokingly addresses white people in that clip, that has sparked something in people. And so there was a post, you mentioned that it's not just, white people that have taken issue of this. There was a post on Threads, and it seems to be written by a black woman. She calls herself a curl specialist. And she said, I'm going to paraphrase it. Dear Michelle Obama, black women do not straighten their hair because of white people's beauty standards. Most black women straighten their hair because they choose to and because it's easier to manage. We don't do anything for a white beauty standard. Black women are the true beauty standard. I understand the inclination of that post, but black women responded to that disagreeing with the overall sentiments. White supremacy does exist. White Eurocentric beauty standards have upheld a systemic belief of what is professional and what is desirable. That is just a fact. So I don't agree with the entire sentiment, but this is what R&B singer India Arie, she wrote a song called I Am Not My Hair in 2006. She's been talking about natural hair and this issue for so long. She said, there is no curl specialist job without the path we laid for you. Maybe the path we laid made it too easy to walk down. So that's the conversation happening among black folks. On the other side, white people are having their own discourse. Megyn Kelly did a segment on YouTube, and in the comments, someone said, I'm going to speak for all white people because Michelle seems to think she can. No white person is forcing you to do your hair anyway. Matter of fact, we don't care. That's your choice. That's one of the comments. That's the overwhelming sentiment. But, we know that white people do care, so much so that laws have been put in place to stop them from discriminating against Black hair, specifically in the workplace. So, it has gotten better, but these issues still exist, and we're not making this up.
You brought up Megyn Kelly. I just want to play that clip. So obviously, Megyn Kelly, former Fox News host, she now has a podcast, a YouTube show. She's a conservative YouTube host. And here's what she had to say a couple of weeks ago.
So what she's saying is she's bitter because society's standards, in her view, don't allow Black women to just walk around with their natural hair. That is bullshit. Black women can walk around with whatever hair they want. Only in Michelle Obama's warped mind do white people not like them unless their hair looks like white hair.
Okay, so what you're hearing there, that's Megyn Kelly's response on her YouTube show. Sarah-Tai Black is just doing a thumbs down, which is fair. But I want to, before I get to the thumbs down that you just gave Sarah-Tai, Cyrus, I want to maybe bring you in on this. Can you give us a sense of how big of a deal the discrimination that Black women have faced because of hair has been?
I mean, it's such a huge issue that books, entire fields of study have been, scholars have spent their entire careers writing about the politics of Black hair. The reality is that there is rampant discrimination against anyone whose hair is perceived to be more textured or more curly or more kinky. You mentioned, Kathleen, the Crown Act had to be passed, an actual law to try to stop discrimination. They were actively firing people for having dreadlocks. And we've seen that, spreading across all of Turtle Island. It's not only something that's happening in the States. I just want to start, though, by saying I have a 14-year-old, and I believe the expression that we need to say to Megyn Kelly is "nice your beak." I believe that's what the young people say. Shut your mouth. Shut your mouth. This is actually not a conversation for you to be wading into. You have nothing to say, nothing of value to add to this conversation, and you should really just stick to talking about, I don't know, white supremacy in other ways as they normally do. But so in Canada, we even saw, of course, a very famous case with Zara, where a Black employee was being told that her hair was not professional, not up to Zara standards while working on the floor because she had she was wearing a curly hair wig. So it wasn't even her natural texture. It was a curly hair wig. And she was told that she wasn't allowed to wear her hair that way, or that it was seen as unprofessional. Myself, working in the workforce, I myself have had lots of experiences of discrimination based on my hair, having dreadlocks, having people at my job reach out and grab onto my hair, touch my hair, make comments about my hair, ask me if I have marijuana because of my hair being in dreadlocks. So there's absolutely a reality of discrimination that is rooted in hair texture that is, again, you need not take my word for this. There are entire books that have been written on this, but this shows the ignorance both of Megyn Kelly. It shows, unfortunately, the ignorance of this person who wrote the original Threads post, that they're not doing the research. They're not looking at the bigger picture before making a comment. It is absolutely true that there would be no curl specialist without all of the labor of people fighting for justice, for people to be able to have their hair naturally the way that it is. I mean, I'm not someone who would normally turn to Chris Rock for any commentary about Black women because I think that he has a lot of work to do and a lot of atoning to do. But did he not make an entire movie called Good Hair, about this reality? And don't even get me started on the person on Threads when India Arie did take time out of her precious day to say, hey, I wrote a song about this. Hey, Solange wrote a song about this. Hey, there are entire, works of it. And that the person on Threads said, I don't know who you are. So there's just like a lack of research in general in this topic.
No, I mean, like, that was
and strong.
A bridge too far to go like, hey, India Arie, I don't know who you are. Let's do a Google. Let's just do one of those real quick.
Google search.
Just to sort of understand the giants upon shoulders you sit. Sarah-Tai, you had a thumbs down a moment ago when I was sort of playing that Megyn Kelly clip, rightfully so. But the thing that I want to ask you is something about this story kind of reveals to me something about the online silos that people exist in. The idea that you could walk through the world and just like not know that history that Cyrus just laid out, the history of Black women's hair being policed, that tells us something about the fractured sort of online environment that we find ourselves in. But what do you make of that? This idea of like such separate sort of experiences online that you don't even come in contact with this history.
Yeah, I mean, I do think we are definitely living in like an increased fractured information silo, like you're saying, but we kind of always have in terms of media. There's a reason, like, for me, growing up in the predominantly white and East Asian suburbs in Vancouver, no one knew about like the Temptations movie, which is so, no one's talking about the Goofy movie over there. And we're kind of being now further shaped by our algorithms and striate even further by things like gender and race. The algorithm knows who we are, or at least it thinks it does. There's a reason why I literally just learned who Jonathan Bailey is. There's a reason why white people, quote unquote, discovered D'Angelo like 10 years ago.
That's true.
But I do think alongside that, in the most, at one time silly and at another time most urgent ways, we are losing the ancient texts. I'm not surprised by Megyn Kelly. I'm never surprised by white people. We're never surprised. We're always disappointed. But when it comes to having Black folks who are curl specialists, Black folks who have coily textured hair growing out of their heads, it's wild to me that there is not an interest taken in knowing the history of your own body and the world around you and how the world around you has shaped that. I truly am utterly confused by the lack of interest in that history. Maybe people need to read older things, like even like given the context of how I grew up, like I did grow up with a strong sense of that history. My 3B hair having ass grew up with a strong sense of that history because I was reading literature from Black women, from like, modern Black literature. And I'm just utterly confused as I am every day. I wake up and look at the world we live in. I'm utterly confused.
All right, losing the ancient text is a real crisis that we're in. Kathleen, last word to you on this. What do you make of these sort of very separate online silos we exist?
Sarah-Tai said everything. I think people are in their own bubbles. They don't pay attention to history. But I think what's happening is that they're also not even listening. They don't even have to read because we know people don't read anymore. So when India Arie is in those comments, like listen to her, listen to the people who've been doing this work for years. Again, we're not making this up. We are benefiting from their labor. So don't disrespect the path that they have paved.
If India Arie says, hey, I wrote some songs about this, Solange wrote some songs about this, go listen to those songs. You might sort of inform the context that you kind of find yourselves in. Okay, we got to leave it there on this. But before we go, last time we had a conversation on the show about Mariah Carey and celebrating her entire legacy. And Sarah-Tai Black got so mad at me for not being on that panel. And since you haven't forgiven us for this next one here is for you, pal. I love the entire panel just vibing. And immediately just like the shoulders start swaying. Listen, arguably the most popular Christmas song of all time. That's All I Want for Christmas Is You. Billboard is reporting that it's back on the Hot 100 charts way earlier than usual this year. Like the vibes out there are like, oh boy, get All I Want for Christmas Is You going way earlier than normal. What is the explanation for that, Sarah-Tai? How have we found ourselves in All I Want for Christmas Is You land so early?
I mean, we're in dark times. I've always joked that like if you hear me playing All I Want for Christmas Is You in like June, like call my friend, call my in case of emergency contact. Like I'm going through it. But I don't the actual rationale, I don't think it's that she's thawing any earlier. She's still thawing at the same time each year, November 1st on the dot. But I do think that this year we're thinking about it more than we usually do, which is already a lot, because she did have that Christmas ad with Sephora to announce her thawing in an even more larger way and bigger way than usual, which did go a bit viral for good reasons than for bad reasons. I think, beyond that kind of soulless answer that I think is partially the truth, it's just that it's an amazing song. Those opening percussive notes, it's giving 19th century, it's giving Tchaikovsky, it's giving I'm a Russian sleeper agent who's been activated immediately. From the moment you hear those notes, you know exactly what song's gonna be playing. You know that Christmas is coming. It's that same instrument we hear, like all of us millennials, we hear in all those other like nostalgic things that keep us warm and cozy in the holidays, Home Alone, for example. It really gets you going. And I'm not a Christmas person. I'm a Mariah fan, but I'm not a Christmas person. We don't see eye to eye on this holiday. Yeah. But this song gets me going. It's amazingly produced. It's timeless. It has this bananas cross-generational appeal. It, of course, is also evoking that Phil Spector Wall of Sound era, songs like Darlene Love's Christmas Baby Please Come Home, which of course Mariah has also covered. It's got that classic 40s and 50s song structure that we think of when we think of classic Christmas standard. Why are you laughing? I'm a scholar. Why are you laughing?
It's that the scholarship is just pouring out. That's what's happening.
Nice citational practices.
Think about the 90s and who else was giving us Nat King Cole? Who else was giving us Bing Crosby? No one. It was Mariah, it was Whitney, it was Luther. That's it. Our amazing trio of vocal producers. This is very serious stuff.
Let's go.
When we're talking about the music video, we have it's like a triple layer nostalgic blend. We've got the nostalgia for that like classic Christmasness that we think of like modern history. We have the 90s nostalgia with the video camera recording. Why are you laughing, Elamin? Why are you laughing? We also have like the new generations that love like an aestheticized nostalgia. It has so much cross-generational appeal. It is, and I say this with love, it is the peak of her vocal strength. It's a stunning song. It's a stunning video. It's a stunning vibe.
I want you to know that none of my laughing was disrespect. It was the laughing of, I have not been in the presence of a Mariah Carey scholar such as yourself in some time. And it is a
I'm very passionate.
And what that was humility coming out. I feel humbled. I feel humbled, and I'm taking a moment with the force of everything that was coming at me. Okay, before I let you guys go, actually I would like a recommendation from each one of you for my weekend. Something I should spend some time with. Syrus, Marcus, Ware, why don't I start with you? What do you want to recommend?
All right, I'm going to say it. We're in budget season. Everyone's talking about the budget. Everybody, they're starting to promote and push for the annual police budget increase. What better thing to do this weekend than to curl up with Sandy Hudson's Defund book and talk about how we might actually want to put some of those funds into the things that we need in our communities, including libraries and community centers and perhaps listening stations for Mariah Carey songs.
What a
reduction.
Reduction.
Sarah-Tai Black, over to you. What do you want to recommend, pal?
This is a bit of an odd recommendation for anyone who knows me, but I've been really enjoying Tim Robinson's The Chair Company. It's so absurd and silly, and this
HBO, right?
Cringe.
HBO show? Yeah.
I believe so. Let's be real, I don't have that subscription. It's just very interesting, and I'm always interested in something that's doing something I haven't seen before, and this show definitely is.
I will say The Chair Company, HBO announced today that it has had the largest debut of largest viewership of any new comedy that they've had, and made me go, oh wow, I have not watched Chair Company, so this recommendation, I'm on it. Kathleen Newman-Bremang, last word over to you, pal. What do you got?
Okay, I'm gonna keep the nostalgia going because I just last night saw Brandy and Monica's The Boy Is Mine tour in New York. It was so fun. It took me back to an era of R&B that I miss. If we're talking history, study that era, study Brandy, the vocal Bible. But unfortunately, they are not coming to Canada, but on Apple Music and probably Spotify, if you're one of those people, there is a tour set list playlist with all of Brandy and Monica's hits. I highly recommend taking some time this weekend, sitting up in your room, belting For You I Will, transport back to the late 90s or early 2000s and have a time.
Incredible recommendations. I'm grateful for all of you. Thank you for being on the show today. This has been a ride and a delight. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Also, Sarah-Tai Black, happy belated birthday to you. Thank you for doing this the day after your birthday.
Happy belated birthday.
Oh.
Happy belated.
My pleasure.
I treasure all of you. Thanks for doing this. Kathleen Newman-Bremang is a deputy director of Refinery 29 Unbothered. She's currently in New York. Sarah-Tai Black is a freelance film critic whose work shows up in the Globe and Mail right here on Commotion. Cyrus Marcus Ware is a visual artist and assistant professor at McMaster University. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. We'll see you on Monday.